Hello, your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheely here again, back for another episode of the History of Comics podcast. This time, part 2, the history of war comic books. When we last left off, we were still in the middle of World War I and the comic books that did adaptations of that, the Great War, and now we're going to keep going. The Phantom Eagle first appeared in WOW Comics number 6 on July 1942 from Fawcett Comics, and was originally a teenage Mickey Malone who dons a stylized aviation suit and builds his own fighter plane to serve in World War II. He later formed his own team, the Phoenix Squadron, a group of fellow teenage pilots in post-war, and starts a charter airline service while searching for the Golden Chalice, which is supposed to contain the formula of peace. Later, when Marvel acquired the character after Fawcett went under, the character was rebooted in Marvel Superheroes number 16 by writer Gary Friedrich and artist Herb Trimpe on September 1968, this time as Karl Kaufman, an American fighting ace who creates the guise of the Phantom Eagle so his German parents couldn't be attacked. The character will eventually join the patriotic super team, the Freedom Five, which also consisted of Crimson Cavalier, the Silver Squire, Sir Steel, and Union Jack, while engaging in time travel adventures and ghost stories, joining forces with everyone from the Hulk to Doctor Strange. Later, the character was revived again in Marvel's Max line as in War is Hell, the first flight of the Phantom Eagle in 2008 by Garth Ennis and Howard Chaykin, a 5-issue miniseries that lasted from May to September of that year. This was an alternative reality version of the character, once again set in World War I, but the character would later reappear again in the Secret Wars tie-in of 2015, Where Monsters Dwell, by Garth Ennis and Russell Braun. Air Fighters number 3 by Hillman was produced in 1942 about Baron Innemon, who in the comic book was a member of von Richtenhoff's The Red Baron's squadron. However, when his plane is shot down, Innemon crashes and sinks into a swamp where he is transformed into the Heap, a monster that will later become the inspiration for the future swamp-like creatures like from Marvel's Man-Thing to DC Swamp Thing. All-American Man of War number 112 in 1965 by DC featured Steve Savage, Balloon Buster, created by Robert Kinnear. Savage would appear sporadically throughout DC, dressing like a cowboy while disappointing his superiors, who only put him up with him due to his expert pilot skills and ability to destroy German combat blimps over France during World War I. The Victor by D.C. Thompson, that ran from January 25, 1961 to November 1992 for 1,657 issues, was meant to spotlight the heroism of medal award-winning British and Commonwealth troops in comic book format. Its weekly True Stories segment highlighted such stories, and in 1963 it featured Ace of Aces about Canadian flying ace Billy Bishop, who received both the Distinguished Flying Cross for 25 victories in 12 days before earning the Victoria Cross for single-handedly attacking a German aerodrome near the Vimy Ridge on June 2, 1917. By the end of World War I, Bishop would amass 72 victories, trailing over the Red Baron Manfred von Richtenhoff with 80, Reinfalk with 75, and Mick Manock with 73. He would later serve as the director of the Royal Canadian Air Force through World War II. Bishop's story was highlighted in the Blazing Combat number 2 as well in 1966 by writer Ari Goodwin and artist Alex Toth in a 6-page story. The end of E-15 was also told in The Victor, this time about the tragic destruction of HMS E-15, a Royal submarine who ran aground on April 17, 1915, while under the Turkish guns, with many lives lost trying to keep it from enemy hands. Lieutenant Commander Eric Robertson led the final assault on the craft, who had previously been recommended the Victoria Cross for his earlier exploits in Gallipoli. Another story from The Victor was Ensol's Eric Patrol, which told how on November 7, 1915, GSM Ensol, a 21-year-old second lieutenant in the 11th Squadron Royal Flying Corps, forced an enemy aircraft to land near Échat, France, while also driving off German fighters' planes before destroying the aircraft with a firebomb. Despite his plane's petrol tank being hit, he managed to fly back behind enemy Allied lines to safety, where he was eventually awarded the Victoria Cross. Edo Blocksek by Jacques Tardy, while usually a mix of fantasy and science fiction, also became known for his horrific depiction of no man's land during the Great War. This was based on recollections from Tardy's own grandfather, a conscripted soldier who served in the trenches in World War I. Tardy kept the story as realistic and harrowing as possible, depicting the soldiers as just wanting to survive a few hours more. In one story, a soldier remained seated outside his trench but have his face blown off. Tardy's black and white art accentuated the wasteland while also noting that many nationalities, from Zengali to Vietnam, served for the French army. Tardy would return to the subject with "Cette était la guerre des tranchées." It was a trench warfare, furthering exploring World War I setting. Tardy also produced Varlet Soldier in 1997, using a two-panel page format about a World War I veteran, Varlet, who survives to become a private detective, though still haunted by the war. In an interesting twist on patriotic heroes of World War I, Our Army at War, number 151, on February 1965, introduced Baron Hans von Hammer, created by Robert Kneier and Joe Kubert, about a German fighter pilot. He would be better known as Enemy Ace at DC, created to tell the German point of view of the war. Playing in on the Red Baron's mystique, he is presented as a brilliant and honorable pilot, meant to show even the enemy could produce such warriors, essentially a good guy fighting for the wrong side. To emphasize this, Kneier highlighted Hammer's devotion to serving his country, Germany, while showing his distaste for killing honorable fighter pilots. The character reappeared in Our Army at War, number 153 and 155, before getting his own series via Showcase in issues number 57 and 58. In 1968, he took the lead in Star Spangled War Stories, issue number 138, and remained at the comic until the issue number 161 in 1972. He would return to Star Spangled again 2 years later with issue number 181, where he dueled with Steve Savage, the Balloon Buster, for 3 issues. Enemy Ace would later return in 10 issues of Men of War in 1977, beginning with the title's first issue and continuing in issue number 20 in 1979, and in a few appearances in The Unknown Soldier in 1981. He would only make sporadic appearances throughout the DC universe for the next decade until 1990, when the graphic novel Enemy Ace War Idol was produced by George Pratt about a Vietnam veteran investigative reporter interviewing Von Hammer, and how they each put to rest the ghosts from their respective wars. The story concluded in 1969 with Von Hammer dying peacefully in a sanitarium at the age of 73. However, like nearly every other comic book character, death was not enough to keep Enemy Ace from appearing again. This time in Guns of the Dragon in 1998 by Tim Truman, a 6-part miniseries set in 1929 where he ends up on Dinosaur Island, a popular setting in the DC universe, and notably in their war comics. He would later return to Germany in Enemy Ace War in Heaven in 2001, a 2-issue miniseries written by Garth Ennis with art by Christian Alamy and Kristen Weston for the first issue, while Russ Heave provides art for the second. This series had Von Hammer leading a Luftwaffe squadron on the Russian front during World War II, only to surrender to another DC war hero, Sergeant Rock. His motivation for this comes from learning of the Holocaust during the Germany's Nazi regime and deciding his honor could no longer allow him to serve such a government. This story was inspired by Adolf Galland, a real-life World War II air ace who has also criticized Hermann Göring for the conduct of Nazis' air war, and upon World War II's end, actually became friends with his RAF rivals. Enemy Ace Von Hammer continues to make sporadic appearances in DC Comics, including his descendants. In issue number 139 of Robin, his great-granddaughter, Lieutenant Ilsa Von Hammer, appeared as a part of a group of soldiers that included Johnny Clouds, a member of the original Losers' grandson. One of the sadly undertold stories of World War I was the service of black soldiers, with a prime example being The Harlan Hellfighters by writer Max Brooks and artist Kenan White, a graphic novel released on April 1st, 2014, about the African-American 369th Infantry Regiment. The regiment was deployed to France in 1918 and signed to the French Army due to white officers refusing to serve with them. Despite this racism, the regiment would serve 191 days in the trenches, more than any other American unit, while suffering the most casualties at 1,500. With these losses, they would also be the first Allied unit to reach the Rhine. They were nicknamed the Black Rattlers in America, Men of Bronze in France, and the Hellfighters by the Germans due to their fighting prowess, which produced 2 Medal of Honor winners. Brooks and White depict most of this in the graphic novel, including the parade the unit received in New York upon returning from war. Naturally, with all these war stories, it's no surprise that many comic creators actually served in the armed forces. As mentioned before, Bruce Barnesfather was a World War I veteran, while the rise of comic books directly preceded World War II, and like many professions, their ranks were entered the service. Some notable names were Will Eisner, Charles Schultz, Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Sam Glanzman, Joss Davis, Wally Wood, Bill Everett, Nick Cardy, Bill Ward, Dan DiCarlo, and Carl Burgess, all who served in World War II in one capacity or another. Joe Kubert served during the Korean War, but joked that he was stationed in Europe during the conflict. Don Lomax, Doug Murray, and Larry Hama served in Vietnam. Each served in different capacities as well. Kirby and Schultz served in the European theater, while Stan Lee was in the Signals Corps with Charles Adams and Theodore Gessel, known to most today as Dr. Seuss. Gessel produced numerous political cartoons in support of the war for PM, a left-leaning New York newspaper, in which he attacked Hitler and Mussolini while also criticizing non-interventionists such as Charles Lindbergh. These cartoons were later collected in Dr. Seuss Goes to War in 1999, which also showed a hypocritical view of calling all Japanese Americans traitors while deploring racist attacks against Jews and blacks. Another notable cartoonist who served during World War II and whose work was inspired by it was Bill Mauldin, who enlisted in the Arizona National Guard in 1940 before he was incorporated into the 45th Infantry Division. While in the service, he volunteered his skills as a cartoonist in the unit's newspaper, where he created Willie and Joe, characters meant to represent the average GI. Mauldin would land with the 45th with the invasion of Sicily in 1943, where he continued to provide cartoons for Stars and Stripes, the American soldiers' newspaper, before being transferred to it completely on February 1944, where he was given his own Jeep to tour the front, gathering material for his 6 cartoons he produced a week. Despite being in the employ of the Army, that didn't stop Mauldin from being critical at times, lampooning the spit-inside mentality and even ridiculed General George Patton, who threatened to throw him into jail over it. However, Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower ordered him to stay away from Mauldin, as he considered his cartoons a good outlet for soldiers' frustrations. Interestingly enough, in a 1989 interview, Mauldin said he admired Patton, and while he thought he was insane, said Patton's military genius did help the U.S. win the war. As for regular soldiers, Mauldin's cartoons were admired by them, and he would win the Legion of Merit and the Pulitzer Prize for his work. By the end of the war, Mauldin wanted to have Willie and Joe killed off, but his editor at Stars and Stripes dissuaded him otherwise. His work would later be collected in Up Front, with Willie even appearing on the cover of June 18, 1945 issue of Time magazine. After the war, Mauldin became a political cartoonist and even worked with the American Civil Liberties Union and at the Chicago Sun-Times, where he created the classic cartoon of Abraham Lincoln weeping at the Lincoln Memorial after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Fellow cartoonist and World War II veteran Charles Schultz would pay tribute to him in his Peanut strip from 1969 to 1998, where Snoopy, dressed as an Army vet, would visit Mauldin at his house, drink some root beer, and trade war stories over every Veterans Day. Mauldin would even draw Willie and Joe one last time in 1998 Peanut strip, with Schultz signing, "Schultz and my hero," with Mauldin's signature underneath. Bill Mauldin would die on January 22, 2003, and be buried on the 29th in Arlington National Cemetery. Of all the wars that influenced comic books, it was World War II that was the most significant, as it occurred right when the comic books were entering the mainstream. When the war broke out, comic books were quick to be used as propaganda in support of the war effort, though they did feature some dated racial depictions, such as JoJo and Captain Marvel Adventures No. 12 by Otto Binder and C.C. Beck in 1942, which depicted him with yellow skin and buck teeth, resembling that of Bugs Bunny over an actual human. Irv Novak, though, showed restraint in Zip Comics with issue No. 26 by 1942, and Tojo and other Japanese characters, as Steel Sterling flies in the Pacific to stop Tojo's broadcast to the nation. Hitler was a natural target, though, with his mustache and hair mocked in almost cartoonish fashion. The most popular example, of course, is Captain America Comics No. 1, March of 1941 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, with the iconic cover of him punching Hitler out. Liv Gleason Publications joined in the fun with the original Daredevil comic, whose first issue actually was titled Daredevil Battles Hitler on November 1941. Hitler would become a regular villain in the series, with other heroes, from the Speed King to the Boy Inventor, getting a chance to knock the dictator out. Justice League of America No. 108 by Lynn Wein and Dick Diller had the team take on a robot Hitler in 1973. However, it was the Fantastic Four No. 21 in December of 1963 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby that had Adolf Hitler made into a full-blown supervillain, when it was revealed that Hatemonger is actually his clone thanks to the scientist Armin Zola. The character has appeared throughout Marvel Comics ever since, and makes a natural villain. As Stan Lee commented, when comic books needed villains, the Nazis were perfect. For examples of propaganda came from Look magazine, who commissioned Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster to do a 2-page spread on how Superman would end the war. It was so prominent it garnered the attention of no less than Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who in his Nazi newspaper Das Schwarze Korps, the Black Battalion, called Siegel an intellectually and physically circumcised chap, in a jab to him being Jewish, and noted the invented Israelite named this pleasant guy with an overdeveloped body and undeveloped mind Superman. Hey, if you make a Nazi mad, you must be doing something right. An irony, considering that the comic book critic Frederick Warren would cite Superman as being Nazi propaganda in the 1950s. Of course, comic books didn't provide propaganda, but also helped support the war directly through selling war bonds. The cover of Captain Marvel Adventures number 15 by C.C. Beck and Pete Costanza was given away as a prize in a contest for war bonds. That same year, Uncle Sam Quarterly number 4 by Quality spotlighted kids who helped the war effort, sponsored by Tootsie Rolls. Even the ads had a patriotic flair, as kids were encouraged to sell seeds called Victory Seeds to help with the war effort. There were numerous patriotic heroes, such as The Shield, who first appeared in Pep Comics number 1 by MLJ Comics 1940, who predated Captain America by nearly a year. Soon, Captain America was battling the Nazis with the Submariner and the Human Torch, as Timely knew a good thing when they saw it. National, the future DC, made Mr. America into American Commando, along with the Star-Gained Spangled Kid, Spirit of 76, Fighting Yank, Commando Yank, Miss Victory, Minuteman, and Flagman. Timely even created a Captain America clone with the Patriot. Another notable superhero was Uncle Sam, who appeared in the Quality Comics with National Comics number 1 in 1940, created by comic book legend Will Eisner. He was depicted as the spirit of a soldier killed during the American Revolution, only appearing when his country needs him. He would later be incorporated into DC Comics when comic Quality went under, and he has made regular appearances since then, often leading to freedom fighters. Joe Simon and Jack Kirby added to the patriotic superheroes again with the Boy Commandos in 1942, first appearing in Detective Comics number 64 about an international group of young boys fighting the Nazis, who they called Ratsies. The series would last for 7 issues in Detective Comics and even got their own title that lasted for 36 issues. They have made sporadic appearances in DC ever since, most recently in The Brave and Bold number 9 of February 2008, where they teamed up with the Blackhawks, and they're classic World War II heroes. Of course, with World War II, there will be comic books depicting daring fighter pilots such as Skywolf, Captain Flight, Captain Arrow, Captain Midnight, and Captain X of the Royal Air Force. Of these flyers, a notable one was Airboy, who first appeared in Hillman Publications' Air Fighters number 2 in 1942, and would last for 11 issues in that comic. It starred a teenage flying prodigy who flew a distinctive bat-shaped plane out of a California monastery. There was even some retroactive comics in the later decades, with The Invaders in 1975 by Roy Thomas, Sal Buscema, Bill Finger, and Martin Goodman, who first appeared in The Avengers number 71 in December 1969. It was originally based on the All Winners Squad, who first appeared in All Winners number 9 in fall of 1946 at Timely, created by Goodman and Bill Finger, and featured the team of Namor, Captain America, Bucky, the Human Torch, Toro, the Wizard, yes, that is a comic book character, and Miss America. It was originally Marvel's first superhero and later revived as The Invaders by Thomas and Buscema, who reimagined them as a superhero team that fought together during World War II. The Invaders would also introduce a British patriotic superhero with issue number 7 on July 1976 with Union Jack, created by Roy Thomas and artist Frank Robbins. Originally Lord James Falsworth, he fought as Union Jack during World War I, notably against Baron Blood, a vampire revealed to be his brother John. After the Great War, he retires to raise a family but returns to service with World War II, once again battling Baron Blood, because, vampires, they can't stay dead, who attacks James's daughter Jacqueline. She is later saved when the original Human Torch gives her a blood transfusion that results in her transforming to become the super-powered hero Spitfire, named after the legendary British fighter plane in World War II. Both characters have consistently appeared throughout Marvel ever since. All-Star Squadron first appeared in Justice League of America number 193 in August of 1981 at DC, also created by Roy Thomas and artist Rich Buckler and Jerry Ordway before getting their own series that September. The idea behind the series was to give stories about the Justice Society of America and other Earth-2 teams, with its history being President Franklin Delano Roosevelt calling the various DC superhero teams at the time, from the JSA to the Freedom Fighters, along with numerous solo heroes, to defend the home front during World War II. Why the president just didn't send them to take over Hitler is explained in issue number 4, as it's revealed that Hitler possessed a spear of destiny, thus creating a magical barrier around the Axis territory. So now we know. It wasn't just soldiers and superheroes who were the subject of stories about World War II, but the lives of ordinary people as well. London's Dark, by writer James Robinson and artist Paul Johnson, 1989, by Titan, took place during World War II London blackout as an ARP warden, Jack Brooks, investigates the murder. Another comic about the same period, Autumn, by writer Colin Clayton and Chris Downs, with art by Horace, was published by Caliber in 1995 about a serial killer during the same blackout. Complete with a hint of the supernatural, the killer believes he can get away with the crimes due to the surrounding carnage from the German bombings. Ethel and Ernest, a true story by Raymond Brigg, was published in 1999 by Jonathan Cape. Briggs is meant as a loving memoir to his parents, who sent their son away to the safety in the countryside while they stayed behind to help build shelters and Ernest volunteered as a fireman, all while witnessing the carnage throughout the London bombing. Occupied France during World War II was also a ripe setting for comic book stories. Le Cerise, The Reprieve by writer-artist Jean-Pierre Gilbert, is about Julien, a Frenchman who returns home during the war only to hide from the Nazis and as a result his own girlfriend. Le Vol de Cabor, The Fight of the Raven, was about Janine, who was betrayed by the police only to escape later. Sadly, while both were acclaimed, these works have yet to be translated in English. Chuck and Bachin, known as Adolf in America, was a 5-volume series from 1983 to 1985, originally titled Dorforo ni Tusaga, Tell Adolf, by manga legend Osamu Tezuka. The story was about two German boys living in Japan, both with the name Adolf during World War II. Adolf Kaufmann, who is also half Japanese, is sent to a German public school and a Hitler youth camp, while the Jewish Adolf Kamil remains in Japan, learning a secret about the more famous German Adolf. Like many of his works, Tezuka manages to work in romance and thrills, creating another unique masterpiece for the master of manga. Sadly, racist depictions of Japanese and Germans were common during this time. In Air Fighters No. 6, on the March of 1943, Airboy was shown killing rats with Japanese heads, were one of the more insidious examples. Surprisingly, this depiction and others like it would continue in the 1970s. Military comics by Quality in 1941 was the company's first foray into the war genre. The comic book was divided in two sections, one for the Army and one for the Navy. It lasted for 102 issues and would become Modern Comics, issue number 43, after the end of World War II. The title was best remembered for introducing the Blackhawks, the Polar Fighter Squadron, in issue number 1, and would later get their own series from 1944 to 1977 for 251 issues, with DC having acquired it in 1957 and kept it going. Created primarily by Chuck Cadora, with input by Bob Powell and Will Eisner, they originally fought the Nazis as the last remnants of the Polish Air Force during World War II, taking on communists post-war and other would-be conquerors. At their height, the series routed Superman in sales, along with spawning a film, serial, and radio series. Most recently, director Steven Spielberg has announced plans to adapt the comic book into a feature film. Back at DC, the series was revived as part of the company's New 52 line for 8 issues from September 2011 to April 2012. The latest series primarily featured the third Lady Blackhawk, a female member of the squadron, with the first being introduced in the Blackhawks number 133 in February of 1959. Another story that came out in military comics was Loops and Banks of the Red Dragon Squadron by Bob Powell, who is credited as Bud Ernest. Following the antics of 2 freelance airmen in China, Klaus Nordling, most famous for creating the Lady Luck character, produced Shot and Sell, another humorous strip about Flyer. The Army-themed stories, such as Blue Tracer by Fred Gurdam, about an engineer who builds the Titler high-tech vehicle, which he uses to then travel to the world and fight the Axis powers. Archie Atkins' Desert Scout featured Arabs, Legionnaires, and Germans. In the Navy section, Yankee Eagle tells the story of a Navy secret operation Jerry Noble and his eagle named Sam. There was also the Death Patrol by Jack Cole, which predated the Dirty Dozen movie by 25 years, about 5 convicts ranging from a safecracker to a con artist who band together to fight the Nazis. Miss America by Ed Wexler was a strange one about a superhero and gifted with superpowers from the Statue of Liberty, no less. Q-Boat by Henry Keffer rounded out the first issue from Albatross, four-masted about the Albatross, the more four-masted schooner equipped with modern and advanced weaponry, including an airplane. At least this story actually had a Navy theme. True Comics by True Comics Incorporated in 1941 featured educational biographies such as Winston Churchill and Simon Bowler along with a history of fighter aircraft. During World War II, the comic focused on biographies related to it, such as U.S. Army Chief General George C. Marshall and General Douglas MacArthur. Even the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, and the predecessor to the CIA, and the Russian allies were featured. The series lasted for 84 issues until 1950. Another comic book series that featured true stories was Medal of Honor, telling stories of Medal of Honor winners. The first comic was published in 1946 by A.S. Curtis. Another Medal of Honor series was made as a black backup feature in DC's Star Spangled War Stories, number 160 in 1964, written and drawn by Norman Maurer. The series also ran Our Army at War. A third series was done by Dark Horse in 1994. Star Spangled War Stories, which has been mentioned numerous times before, was a DC anthology comic first published in 1952. First titled Star Spangled Comics, it will be renamed with issue number 131 and lasted for 204 issues until being renamed The Unknown Soldier with issue number 205, after one of its most popular characters in the series. The series will also be the home of Mademoiselle Marie, Enemy Ace, and the classic story The War That Time Forgot. The series was later revived with a new 52 launch in September 2014 called Star Spangled War Stories featuring G.I. Zombie, which would last for 8 issues till March of 2015. Movie Comics number 10123-409 in 1964 by Dell is also notable, as it told us the true story of John F. Kennedy's service in the Navy. That was an adaptation of the movie PT 109, starring Cliff Robertson as JFK in 1963. Stories of the Resistance were also featured in comics, such as Monsieur X, who made his only appearance in Military Comics number 6 in 1942 in a 9-page Secret Wars news story. Created by Al McWilliams, he was a domino mask-wearing Frenchman who left a Zorro-like X to terrorize the Nazis. During Military Comics number 8 by Timely in that same year introduced Lieutenant John Watkins and the V Battalion. Illustrated by Ben Thompson, about a resistance group operating deep inside Nazi-controlled Europe, it would mark Nazis with a large V on their chest, also relieving them of their shirts. They would only make other appearances in the Comedy Comics number 9. Smash Comics number 33 from Quality in 1942 featured the Marksman, a 7-page story drawn by Ed Cronin, a Robin Hood-like hero complete with a hood and bow and arrows. The character would battle in the resistance at the end of the war, or more specifically Smash Comics number 58, eventually joining forces with the Three Shadows, a Czech, a Pole, and an Austrian, no, that's not a joke about going into a bar, who escaped a concentration camp to fight the Nazis. A more realistic take on the resistance was Mademoiselle Marie, who appeared in the Star Spangled War Stories number 84 in 1959, created by Robert Knyer and artist Jerry Guardinetti, which ran for 8 issues. Chat Noir, the Black Cat, a.k.a. Steve Robinson, was created by Robert Knyer and Joe Kubert, notable for being a black resistance fighter in World War II, appearing in Star Spangled War Stories number 151. However, Chat would be overshadowed with the other character Knyer and Kubert created in that same issue, the Unknown Soldier, arguably one of the most popular characters in the war comic book genre. A heavily bandaged warrior whose name is inspired by the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington Cemetery, he came with the motto, "He is a man that no one knows but is known by everyone." The unknown soldier is also known as the immortal GI to explain how he always manages to appear in every major American conflict since World War II. He first appeared in Our Army at War number 168 in June of 1966 in the story I Knew the Unknown Soldier, and Knyer and Kubert enjoyed the character so much they moved him into Star Spangled War Stories number 151 on June and July of 1971, and lasting to issue number 204 in February 1977, after which the series was renamed The Unknown Soldier with issue number 205. His identity was never revealed, implying he was a young soldier whose face was disfigured early in his service. Despite this, he is a master of disguise and takes some ingenious latex masks, though his scars causes his face to itch while wearing them, making him to scratch his face in a distinctive way. The series would continue to issue number 268 in October of 1982 with the story A Farewell to War, where he is sent on a mission to stop a Nazi superweapon during the Battle of Berlin with Sparrow and Chat Noir, with all 3 dying while accomplishing their mission. However, in that same issue, a staff sergeant is seen in Berlin on May 7, 1945, when the Nazis surrendered, scratching his face in a distinctive way. The character was too popular to leave in the grave forever, though, and even teamed with Superman in DC Comics in DC Comics Presents number 42 on February of 1982, where he's assisted by a mysterious soldier. Superman begins to believe that he is the immortal GI while trying to stop a nuclear holocaust. At the end of the story, Clark Kent goes to visit the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington Cemetery to pay respects, all while a gardener looks on in the background, scratching his face in a distinctive way. Swamp Thing number 82 in January 1989 finally revealed the unknown soldier was in fact still alive in the story Brothers in Arms Part 2, but how he was kept classified by the U.S. government. He even appeared in Blackest Night event in 2009, where he is depicted as a Black Lantern who attacks the tomb of the unknown soldier, proclaiming, "I have a name." The character would also have a 12-part miniseries in 1988 by writer Jim Owsley and artist Phil Gasson, in which he explains he is literally immortal and has a more cynical view towards war. Writer Garth Ennis and artist Kellen Plunkett did a 4-part miniseries in 1997 about a CIA agent who investigates the unknown soldier's involvement in America's past wars, all while the unknown soldier is looking for a replacement. The character remains a popular war figure in DC Comics to this day and is reported an inspiration for Darkman, the 1990 superhero film by Sam Raimi, who with both characters having a scarred face covered with bandages and are both masters of disguise. And with that, we'll leave off for now. But believe it or not, we are still in the middle of World War II comics. Like I said before, these are some of the most popular comics of the genre. We will continue with this subject matter and eventually move on to future wars and all before that.
Than a New Day pancake. More fun than a super kick party. It's the wrestling podcast from the host, who is the hammer swinging, burrito eating, well, you know the rest, of Thunder Talk. Sexy Thor. It's the Ring of Thunder, found in the Thunderverse and among the great podcasts of the ESO network.
And now it is May 22nd, 2025. Time for the favorite comic of the week. Wonder Woman number 21 by Tom King and Gilliam March, which sees the conclusion of the two-part Murder on Mount Olympus story arc that finds Batman and Wonder Woman still trying to solve the mystery of who killed the god of war Ares and inflamed Wonder Woman's mother Hippolyta for it. This is just another great issue that, while Tom King does not know how to write a great mystery, especially against the Greek god Pantheon, the real gem of this story is the friendship between Batman and Wonder Woman, showing how much they do love and care about each other, especially when Batman takes a moment to comfort Diana over the loss of her love, Steve Trevor. And also, it's masked by Gilliam March's gorgeous art, which has a nice gritty feel to it, perfect for this almost like a crime noir story. Like I thought it was a murder mystery after all. But he has a great job showing all the Greek gods and the mystery and so forth, and just easily just a great little mystery, and probably the best Tom King's done Wonder Woman to date, which gives me hope for the future. I know the rest of his runs a little up and down, though I still love those backups with Trinity. I cannot wait for the upcoming Trinity series with Bell and Ortega. But these two issues right here, number 20 and number 21, fantastic. And with that, we will conclude with this episode of the History of Comics podcast. Join me again next week for another part from the archives of the History of War comics. And until then, go out and enjoy some good comic book, and definitely check out the current Wonder Woman run by Tom King. These last two issues have been fantastic.